600 kilometers, about 373 miles, from the nearest harbor, a single blade of basalt stabs out of the Pacific Ocean. This is Ball's Pyramid, the tallest volcanic sea stack on Earth. A geological phantom towering above the waves at 562 meters, 1,840 feet, taller than the Eiffel Tower. Only 300 meters at its base, the rock looks almost two-dimensional until you sail beside it. Located 643 kilometers, about 400 miles northeast of Sydney, inside Australia's Lord Howe Island Marine Park. This immense rock rises from the sea, remote, brutal, and for most, unreachable. Yet some still dare to climb this steep rock. Back in 1788, Royal Navy officer Henry Lidgbird Ball first spotted the towering rock while sailing to Norfolk Island with convicts. The spire was named after him and marked on early naval charts. Ball mentioned it in his logbook, but didn't try to land. Probably a smart move, with the crashing waves and steep cliffs. For nearly 100 years, Ball's Pyramid remained a mystery. It appeared on maps and was occasionally seen by passing ships, but no one set foot on it. Sailors told stories of waves smashing against the cliffs, high enough to soak a ship's deck, and of seabird calls echoing for miles across the still ocean. The first to test those old sailor stories was Henry Charles Wilkinson, a geologist with the New South Wales Department of Mines. In February 1882, his survey boat, the Comet, crept within 60 meters, 197 feet, of the rock. 4 men rowed a small dinghy toward a narrow ledge, carefully timing their move between 3-meter swells. They jumped onto the slick basalt, dragged the dinghy out of the surf, and scrambled about 6 meters up to safer ground. But less than 2 hours later, strong northeast winds forced them to retreat, rowing as fast as they could back into open sea. The old sailors' stories seemed to be true. Landing here was every bit as dangerous as they'd claimed. The mission wasn't a complete failure. Wilkinson managed to collect rock samples and made a surprising discovery. Ball's Pyramid wasn't just a jagged sea stack. It was the eroded core of a massive shield volcano, its outer layers carved away by millions of years of wind and waves. That short visit redefined the spire. From a mysterious rock in the ocean, it became a geological marvel, one that would quietly spark the imagination of future climbers. Even today, most boats stay 30 to 50 meters, or 98 to 164 feet, away. The ocean floor drops over 2,000 meters, or 6,500 feet, almost straight down. There's no reef or sandbar to slow the waves. Swells from the southern Pacific wrap around the rock and crash into each other. Between Wilkinson's visit in the 1960s, Ball's Pyramid attracted many dreamers, but stopped them before they even set sail. At sea level, the rock gives no help. Only sharp ledges covered in barnacles. Climbers must jump into the water, grab slippery holds, and pull themselves up. One mistake means getting slammed into the rock or dragged under. That brutal entry explains why fewer than 50 people have ever reached the top. In 1936, a climbing club from Sydney University planned to go, but bad weather ruined their boat trip. In 1959, 2 officers from the Royal Australian Navy flew over the rock to scout it. They decided there was no practical route to the top. But when their photo was printed in newspapers, it only made people more curious. Interest in climbing Ball's Pyramid grew in the early 1960s. Rock climbing was becoming more advanced and more popular in Australia. In 1964, a well-prepared team set out to reach the summit. The group was led by Dick Smith and included skilled climbers. They brought a larger boat that could sail straight from Sydney to the pyramid. They made it to the base and set up camp on a narrow ledge. But progress stopped soon after. The rock was loose and broken. The cliffs were steeper than expected. Their climbing gear, pitons and wedges, often didn't hold because the basalt was unstable. To climb higher, they had to carry heavy ropes and equipment over sharp, crumbling ridges. One wrong move could be fatal. Sleeping on the rock was also tough. The team camped in wet sea caves. Water dripped from the ceiling. Large centipedes crawled over their gear. During high tide, waves reached the ledge, so they took turns sleeping to stay safe. In the end, they only made it a few hundred meters above sea level. The team had to turn back. In 1965, a new team set out to climb Ball's pyramid, but this time with a different strategy. The expedition was led by Bryden Allen, one of Australia's most experienced climbers, along with Jack Pettigrew, John Davis, and Dave Witham, all members of the Sydney Rock Climbing Club. Two New Zealand climbers, Don Wilcox and Jack Hill, joined as support crew. The expedition was partly funded by the Sydney Morning Herald, which also sent climber and journalist Ben Sandilands to document the climb. This wasn't just a climb, it was a story. Unlike the 1964 team, Allen's group focused heavily on planning and preparation. Near Sydney, they trained for sea landings, learning how to time their jumps through the surf and grab onto wet rock before the waves pulled them back. They studied maps and photos of the pyramid and planned their route before even setting sail. Their gear showed how serious the climb was. Along with the basics, they packed over 600 meters, 1970 feet of rope, and two 12-volt car batteries powering a ship-to-shore radio. When the team arrived in February 1965, the sea was still rough. A recent cyclone had stirred up heavy swell. Their boat, the Pacific Chieftain, could only get within 40 meters, about 130 feet of the rock. One by one, the climbers jumped into the ocean, dragging their gear in floating bags. They timed the waves, scrambled onto the base, and climbed to a small sea cave about 100 meters, 328 feet, up. It was wet and cramped, but safe enough to be their base. From there, they began the climb. The team followed the southwest ridge. It looked like the best option, though it was steep and full of hard sections. Their first goal was Winkelstein's steeple, about 250 meters, 820 feet high. A previous team had reached it, but never gone beyond. To move upward, the climbers fixed long ropes to the rock. These lines were used to secure each section. They carried over 600 meters, 1970 feet of rope, hauling it up and reattaching it again and again. As they climbed higher, the ridge narrowed. The rock became loose and unstable. Around 400 meters, they hit a major obstacle, a large overhang. From here, they had to use gear instead of handholds, pulling themselves up with equipment placed in the rock. It was slow, tiring work. Then, on February 14th, Valentine's Day, Bryden Allen and Dave Witham reached the summit. It had taken nearly 8 hours. Not long after, John Davis and Jack Pettigrew joined them. The summit stood at 562 meters. It was surprisingly flat, about 30 meters, 98 feet across. From the top, they could see Lord Howe Island in the distance. In every other direction, just open ocean. They built a small cairn, left a message, and opened a bottle of champagne. But they didn't stay long. The light was fading, and the climb down was just as dangerous. That night, they slept cold and exposed on a narrow ledge before finally making it back to sea level. The 1965 climb proved that Ball's pyramid could be conquered, but it also showed how brutal the challenge really was. Most climbers stayed away. Interest faded for a few years. Then, in 1970, Australian climber Keith Bell and his partner John Worrell returned with a bold new plan. Instead of following the busy southeast route, they aimed for the untouched West Ridge, a jagged skyline that looked nearly impossible from the sea. They landed before sunrise and began their climb, weaving past crumbling rock towers known as the Chichester Gendarmes, razor-thin spires shaped by years of wind. That night, they slept on a ledge barely as wide as a surfboard. For 2 days, they fought through loose rock, diving seabirds, and rain-slicked stone. But they made it. Bell and Worrell reached the summit, completing the first ever ascent of the West Ridge. 14 years after he helped launch the very first attempt, radio pioneer Dick Smith returned in February 1979, teaming up with climbers John Worrell and Hugh Ward. The sea was unusually calm, and their fishing boat, Larissa Jane, slid quietly beneath the cliffs. Working fast, the trio found the faded ropes left by the 1965 ascent, re-threaded them, and pushed 214 meters, about 700 feet of new kernmantle line, into the crumbling cracks. Within 48 hours, they were on the summit once more. From a pack came a blue flag with the Southern Cross, an official gift from New South Wales Prime Minister Neville Wran. They planted it in the basalt, staking Australia's formal claim to the spire. By the mid-1980s, the dangers of climbing Ball's pyramid had become impossible to ignore. Rescue crews admitted there was no safe way to evacuate an injured climber. Helicopters couldn't get close. Gusts of wind pushed them off course. And the rock itself, worn down by salt and storms, had become too fragile to trust with gear. At the same time, scientists were beginning to understand just how rare and delicate the pyramid's ecosystem really was. In 1986, the New South Wales government made a tough call. They banned recreational climbing. Safety, erosion, and ecology all played a part. The spire was no longer just a climbing goal. It was something to protect. Still, curiosity didn't vanish. A few years later, the rules changed slightly. Researchers could apply for special permits, though only a few were ever granted. In 2001, researchers made an amazing discovery. On a steep slope of Ball's pyramid, they found the Lord Howe stick insects, a species believed to be extinct since the 1920s. People call them tree lobsters because they're big, tough, and can grow up to 15 centimeters, about 6 inches long. They were hiding in a single patch of low shrubs, 100 meters or 328 feet above the ocean. Only 24 were found. But somehow, they had survived. Alone, unseen, and forgotten for nearly 80 years. That discovery changed the way people saw Ball's pyramid. It wasn't just remote or dangerous anymore. It was a rare place, a last refuge, where life held on when no one thought it could. Today, the rock is home to seabirds like Providence petrels and masked boobies, and rare plants like Melaleuca hawaiiana, which grips the cracks with roots tough as wire. Most research now happens from a distance. Drones and cameras track changes and watch the wildlife. On rare occasions, scientists still return in person, carefully, quietly, and only when absolutely necessary. Ball's pyramid is more than just a climb. It's a geological monument, a test of human endurance. Few people have ever stood on its summit, and even fewer will in the future. Ball's pyramid doesn't just rise from the sea. It rises above it all. If stories like this fascinate you, hit subscribe. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.